Hi there, my name's Jan from JB Crafts. Thank you for joining me today and welcome to my channel. So we're back today with the next video in my colour theory series, and we're going to move on slightly today and look at the next set of colours on our colour wheel. But just very briefly, I'm just going to touch on what we've done so far. And if you haven't come across these videos yet, we've done two so far, and we started out right at the beginning with the primary colours, and then last time on my last video we did the secondary colours. So just to talk again very briefly, I'm not going to keep recapping exactly the same information, but just very briefly to look at the terms that we've learned so far. So we've talked about contrast being the difference in the colours, and for the last couple of weeks the three primary colours here are very much a contrast. They fall in different positions on the wheel. And then on the last video we looked at the secondary colours, which again very different colours on the wheel, forming a contrast between those colours. The opposite of that is the harmony that colours provide, and what we're going to do today is we're going to have a look at colours that sort of sit closer to each other on the colour wheel. So if you think here, we've got this lovely arrangement of colours that flow from one into the next around that colour family, giving you some sort of harmony within the designs. So that's what we're going to hit on today. I also mentioned the fact that we've got half of the colour wheel. So if I just bring this back round to the red again, we have very much half of the colour wheel that has got our warm shades on, so this side of the wheel, and then we've got the other half that have got the cooler shades on there. All right, we also talked about the term hue being just a magic name. It's just the name that people use for the actual pure colour. So the colours around the outside of the wheel, if you hear somebody referring to the hue, it's just a fancy name for colour. That really is all it means. And like I said, we've already covered primary and secondary colours. So what we're going to look at today is the next group of colours on the wheel, which are called tertiary colours. So that's our new theory for today, the tertiary colours. So tertiary colours are the ones that you find in between. So for example, if I have a look at the red and the orange, we've actually got primary colour and a secondary colour. The tertiary colours are what we find in between. So these are made using a mixture of one primary colour and one secondary. So for example, we've got orange red and red orange. And then if I go a little bit further around here and look at the orange being the secondary colour mixed with the primary colour, we've got the yellow orange and the orange yellow. So all this means, tertiary colours, just means all that means is just mixing one of those secondary colours with a primary colour. So again, for example, if we look at primary colour yellow with secondary colour green, there are always some shades, some colours in between those two colours. We've got green and blue, and so on. You've got blue and the violet, and so on, and then back up to violet and the red, and we've got here. So that's what we're going to work on today, and that's what I'm going to do my tutorial on today for you guys. So I've actually chosen to work around this warm sort of side of the wheel here. So we're going to have a look between kind of the red through the orange. So we've got primary colour and secondary colour. We're also going to look at the orange and the yellow, so primary colour and secondary colour. And this is what I've popped together for you guys today. So we're going to do a little bit of ink blending. We're going to do some embossing using an embossing folder. And I've just done a nice little neat technique on here where you cut into the piece of cardstock before you emboss it, so that I've actually recessed that nice little die cut sentiment in there. Again, just decorated that inside in this one just to add a little bit of extra details using those same colours. So very much the warm tones from here. This is actually cardstock that's been inked as well, and I'll talk through this as we go along there. And then I've just put this on a white card base. This is actually Centura Pearl, so it's got a little bit of a shimmer on it. introduced a tiny bit of gold, which is sort of a metallic shade. This doesn't actually appear on the colour wheel, it's a metallic colour, but they're really nice for contrasting either matting and layering embellishments like we've got here. So this is what we're going to make. I'm just going to pop that there for a second, and I'm going to bring my inks in again. We're back to the oxides. I won't apologise for these are my favourite inks, and I do tend to reach for them a lot, but I have got some other samples using other ideas later in the tutorial. So what I did is I went through my inks, and again I used the little swatch chart that I've got, which I've mentioned in past videos, and started off with the yellows, and I got as far as, let's have a look, we need the fossilized amber. So what I did was sort of have a look here at which ones matched these the best, and I came up with fossilized amber for that yellow orange, really nice match there. And then for the this one was for the orange yellow, and then for the yellow orange I came back a little bit because I needed to go back towards the oranges, and we chose wild honey. So we can see we've got those two colours now that are in between that nice bright yellow and our secondary colour orange. And then I came back round this side of the wheel here and had a look for one of the paler oranges, came up with dried marigold here. So you can see this one's not a bad match. You know, we'll talk about how these change as they come down the colour wheel in future tutorials. And then for that orange red, again we're sort of coming very much into that sort of brighter orange, and I landed on crackling campfire here. So if I move the chart out of the way and look at the actual oxide colours, this is my range now of tertiary colours, which are starting from using the red as a primary colour, through the orange as a secondary colour, and into the yellow as another primary colour. So we've got that lovely mixture of colours. So that's what we're going to do to start out with on our card today. So I'm going to pop the deepest one to one side. I'm not going to blend with this one. I'm going to use this one to bring out the embossing. So I'm just going to work with these three to create my lovely background for that particular card. So let's pop that to one side for a second. I'm going to bring in my blending mat just to protect that surface again. And then I've got a couple of blending brushes at the ready here. We've got just the yellow and the orange. I just use one brush. Well, I've got a couple of brushes, sort of light yellows, darker yellows, light oranges, darker oranges, and that's what we're going to use to do our blending today. And I'm going to start out with a piece of cardstock that measures 4 5/8 by 6 5/8. So my embossing folder that I'm going to use is a 7 by 5, so I tend to cut my cardstock just that smidge smaller so that it fits in nicely and I get my edge to edge embossing. So we're going to start on here, and I'm just going to use a mixture of these three colours, literally just to add some colour, and I'm not worried what this looks like because it's going to fade right into the background. So I've got a little bit here to just check that we're working, and again I'm just going to bring this in. I not really worried about what it looks like at this stage. I don't need the perfect blend. I just want to get some colour down on my actual cardstock. So I tend to sort of work in areas of 3. So again, that lovely sort of really nice golden yellow, that's the fossilized amber. And as the name suggests, when I think of amber, I think more of an orangey tone. So it's got that lovely orange cast to it here in the yellow. So 3 areas with the yellow in. We can always come back to those if we want to tidy up as we go along. And I'm going to do a little bit of further blending when we've got all the colours down. The next one's going to be the wild honey, which has got a little bit more of that orangey apricot tone to it. So again, load up my brush, and I'm going to bring in, I'm just going to grab some of my tape again just to hold the cardstock. With the oxide inks, your fingers will lift the ink. So what I tend to do is just use a little piece of sticky tape and use this to hold my cardstock down. So again, I'm going to apply some of that orangey tone, and these, you can see how these are very, very similar colours, which is where that tertiary colour family comes from, the one that blends next into the next one, and so on. I'm going to leave space for that third colour there, and just pop a little tiny bit along this edge here. I tend to work in sort of sets of 3s, but that's not law. It is just sort of how my mind works. And then the third colour is going a little bit more sort of apricot almost in tone now. It's part of that orange family again. And I'm going to bring that into the gaps. Now I have used the same brush here because these are both part of that orange family. If I was going much darker, I'd swap to my darker orange brush. But the oxides are very forgiving as far as mixing colours are concerned. So again, just applying that ink there, and I just want to make sure we've got a nice even coverage ready to start working on with the embossing. So last little bit there with that dried marigold, and you can see how nicely those actually blend together. If you've ever struggled with ink blending, these are the inks to go for, they really are. So I'm just going to bring that yellow brush back in now, and just where I've got sort of more of a definite line going on there, if I just use the yellow, you can see how it all sort of blends beautifully together. Absolutely gorgeous. I love that. That's just what we were looking for. So the next thing I'm going to do is add a little bit of water. So I'm just going to bring in my fan brush, because these react so well with water. I'm just going to use my water spray there, get that brush wet, tap off any excess, and then I just want to add, and again this is all going to fade into the background when we start embossing, but it just adds another layer of detail. So that's all I'm going to do. I've got a piece of kitchen paper at the ready, so we're going to pop that to one side. The longer you leave this, the better reaction you will get, but because I actually want to continue working on it, I'm just going to bring in now my piece of kitchen paper and basically just blot that cardstock, take up, and it'll lift the ink. It just gives a really nice finish. There we go. Now that's not too wet now, I'm not too worried about that. So I'm going to pop the brushes to one side, give this a little wipe, and then the next thing, I'll use that bit that I've just had there, make sure we've got rid of all the excess ink. The next thing I want to do before I use the embossing folder, because we're going to emboss this piece and add a bit more ink at that point, but just before then I want to actually do some die cutting, because if I emboss first and then cut my die cut aperture, it's going to start and flatten the embossing. So I'm going to die cut this piece first and then run it through the embossing folder. So I've been through my stash, and honestly I've dug out some quite old items today. I've got, let me just take that out of the packet there. This is an old sentiment die here. It's been out a very, very long time. Gemini brand from Crafter's Companion, and I just wanted the word hello, but I wanted one that had that nice little bubble background behind it. So this is like a matte layer that you can sit your wording on. So this is the bit that I'm going to use to start off with, and I will take that one off because we're going to refer back to that one. So just to make sure I've got this the right way up, I just want to make sure that my word hello, just make sure that this is the right way and that you're cutting into it at the right place. So I'm going to position this in here. I'm going to add some low tack tape, but I'm going to tape it to the inside here so that I'm not risking damaging any of the ink here. And I want it sort of down towards the bottom edge. I'm leaving enough here that it doesn't make the card unstable. And then I'm going to tape it across that panel on the inside. Okay, now my die cutting machine is behind me, so I will just have to reach over there just to pop this through, and then I'll be back to show you what that looks like. So just bear with me for a second while I pass that through there. So if I bring that back out now, we can see we've got that nice die cut piece. It's actually come out with the magnetic shim there. So you can see it's just snagged, which is why I put my tape on the inside there, because I don't technically need that piece. And then the next thing that we're going to do is actually pop it through the embossing folder. Now you can do this with absolutely any embossing folder, but I chose this one. It's got a nice sort of floral pattern on with a little bit of sort of distressed imagery in the background. It's called Climbing Roses. Again, I think it's a Crafter's Companion one. I'm not sure. But I'm going to pop this inside here now. And now we've got our aperture in place, I can actually emboss this one with the folder. So again, just bear with me for a second. I don't actually have room on my desk to bring the machine in, so it's all set up in my craft room behind me. So I'm just going to put my plates together, and yes, I am still using my original purple plate there, and I'm going to pass that through the machine too. There we go. Okay, so let's move. No, I'll leave the mat because I'm going to do another stage to this. So if I lift this out now, you can see it's got that beautiful, beautiful texture on there now. So if I just lift this forward slightly, and sometimes you can actually see it on the back, and we've got that nice detail. But just to bring that detail a little bit more, that's where I'm going to bring in that fourth ink. So rather than my blending brushes, I've got these different style brushes for this job. This is the Crackling Campfire, which you can see is quite a bit darker. And all I'm going to do is use this brush to swipe across here. So again, I'm just going to tap off some of the excess on that scrap there to make sure it's not too dark. And then just that side to side movement on here, you can see how it brings out that beautiful embossing, but we've still got that same family of our tertiary colours, so all those colours that sit next to each other on the wheel. And I'll bring you the wheel back in a second when we've done this to show you that finished effect. But I love just a really light hand, which I have had to practice because I'm quite heavy-handed. And I come at it from all angles so that it gets the embossing. It's also caught the inside of that aperture as well, which gives it a nice finish. And that's all I'm going to do there. So we'll pop those to one side. That's the inks finished with there. That's my little spare piece. And you can see now we've got that beautiful, beautiful finish on there. So that's going to be the top section of my card. So just make sure my hands aren't too covered in ink. I don't want it all over the card pieces. So we're actually working on just a slightly larger than 5x7. I've got a 5.5 by 7.5, and this was determined from starting here and working my way up with some mats and layers. So I've actually done a little bit of matting and layering to go on the top here, and again I've kept it very, very neutral. I've done a very pale gold, which, like I said, was the metallic colour that we brought in, and it's part of that warm colour family. And then I've got a layer of cream as well, which is a very, very sort of diluted shade of yellow, and we'll come back to that in future tutorials. So my mat is 5x7, my gold mat there. And this is one of my favourite gold cardstock. So yes, I've taken the centre out of it for use on something else. The cream one is 4 3/4 by 6 3/4. So these are simply going to fit onto my card. And then I'm actually going to bring this one on flat as well and just pop them all together. So again, I've got those slightly different borders. We've got a 1/4 inch a slightly narrow one, and the really skinny, almost like a 1/16 of an inch on the cream. So let's get all those popped together. So onto the Centura Pearl, I am just going to use my double-sided tape here. I tend not to use my all-purpose glue on the shiny surfaces, which the Pearl has got a coated surface, and this particular gold cardstock, which is a Creative Expressions card, is also got that sort of pearlescent finish on it. So I'm just going to pop that on straight onto the card here and leave that nice border around the edge. But then, because we've now got our cardstock, plain cardstock, and this is actually cardstock, here comes the all-purpose glue. So any of you that watched me before know that I reach for this constantly. It's one of my favourite glues for using with paper crafting. There we go. So I'm actually going to load up the back of my embossed piece now, and this will all sink in nicely into those embossed areas to give us a really good finish. Make sure we go around that aperture because I want that to be stuck down as well, and then a little bit in there. So this one, as I say, is just, and again, that wet glue, it's got a tiny skinny little border, but the wet glue allows you to just slide everything into place. And then I am going to bring out my block again and pop that on here just to let that set, and then we'll talk through what we're going to do for the next part. So I do have my little tub of tricks again, and if I bring that die set back in, I've actually cut the hello out of what was left. I cut out the back of that matte layer, so this has come in handy for doing the embellishments. So we've got the hello there, and that is going to fit beautifully in that aperture because we used the bubble. This is going to fit in here beautifully and just drop into the background. Now I've cut this a couple of times. I've used craft card in the back just so that I'm not wasting that lovely gold, but that gold layer on the front. So that's going to drop into the aperture. And then I also thought, right, I want some embellishments today. And I've gone for dragonflies today instead of the butterflies. I do use butterflies a lot, but I thought we'd have a go with the dragonflies. And this is actually a Gemini Elements die that was brought out when they launched the Gemini Mini. So really nice size embellishments on here. And I've just cut out of that same gold a couple of this particular size here. So if I just move that, you can see. So we've got these to go on the top of the card here just to add a bit of interest up at the top there. And then I just felt that it needed a little bit of finishing. So any of your flower dies, absolutely any. And I coloured my cardstock to keep it all in line with that lovely crackling campfire. So just applied some to some scrap card, and I've just cut out 3 little flowers, any flower die, and then those Simply Sentiments are going to make an appearance again with the word friend. So we're saying hello friend. So let's get all those stuck onto the card. So we've got all our embellishments there. I'm going to flick over to my PVA, my tacky glue here, just to pop these in. And we're going to do the sentiment to start off with here. And again, it doesn't need a lot. It only wants little tiny tacks of glue here, just in prominent places, so that we've got this attached to our card. It's going to sink into that kind of aperture that we created with the bubble. And I'm just going to drop this in now, and you can see it just lines up beautifully in there. And then I'll just pop that block back on there again, just to give some even pressure. And while we're doing that, I'll leave that down at the bottom. While we're doing that, we'll pop our little dragonflies on. And I just want to bend their wings slightly around my finger there, just so there's a little bit of detail. And then what I'm going to do is just apply glue down the body here. So again, tiny little bit of that tacky glue. Just pop some nice orangey coloured pearls in there so that we've got that little bit of correlation with the colour scheme. So that one's going to go there. And then I am going to bring in this one and do the same. So again, just down that body section there. And this one's going to go, didn't do the wings, did I? There we go. We should be able to still give them a little shape. And then this one, I'm just going to pop just at a slightly different angle there, so it looks as if they're flying around. So again, that glue does dry clear, so if any of it does seep out, I've got a little bit there, but it will dry clear. So this one should be good to go now. I've also got my little friend stamp piece here. Again, just a bit of glue on the back. And this one's going to go here down at the bottom, so it says hello friend. And then just, as I say, I just felt as if it needed a little bit more contrast there. So these are just an extra decoration. You may have punches that you can do this with. I know a lot of you have got the flower dies. So anything that you've got in there. So we're going to go with the little one here. And then I'm just going to bring another little one across this side just to balance it out. Whoops. Don't throw it away. And then I have got a piece for the inside. So again, this one's just going to come on this side just to offset there. And I've actually stamped the inside piece here. This one's 5 by 7, so it's the same size as that gold mat. And what I'm going to do is bring my mat back in here. I'm also going to bring in that dusting brush that I used and use what's left. I'm not going to re-ink it. I'm just going to use what's left on it to just come round the edge. And it doesn't look as if you're doing much, but once we put it against the white card, it will just lift that edge. So I didn't want a lot of ink. The residue that's left in that brush is more than enough. And again, I'm just coming in from the side there and brushing it into that design. Probably a little bit heavier on those 4 corners. But when we actually put that, if I show it you this way round, you've got the white on white. But then when we turn it over, just look how it lifts it off that card. So again, we'll go with that all-purpose on the back of here. And I think on the one that I had prepared, I've just popped a little bit of embellishment inside, and I'll show you how I got to that point. So this one I've just kept plain. That's going to sit in the inside there. Just wriggle it into place and we'll let that dry. And that's our finished design there. So you can see we've got that lovely colour palette with those tertiary colours. I'll bring the one in that I made before, and all I did, I'd got this little bit left over and managed to squeeze out of it somehow. I'm not quite sure how, but I actually managed to squeeze out part. I didn't need a whole dragonfly, but part of one out of this bit that was left here, just again to link that inside. And then I've got a couple of little circles there linking it to the outside there. So that's our design using those tertiary colours, and I chose, as I say, from that red. We skipped the primary red, but we have used that red tone to mix the orange red and the red orange with the orange here. And then we also use the orange and the yellow to arrive at these tertiary colours, the yellow orange and the orange yellow. So that's where I landed with my colour families today. But I also wanted to show you a couple more samples using the other sections on the wheel. So if we spin round here to the in fact, yeah, we'll do the blues first of all. So I actually got the yellow, which is primary, into green, which is secondary, and back to blue, which is primary. So we've got these 2 shades here. So I had a look through my scrap stash and just pulled out some scraps that I thought fit that kind of colour family. So you can see here we've got a couple of shades of green, this one much more yellow, this one's going towards the green, and then I've got that lovely blue green, and then we've got a slightly darker one there going towards the actual blue. And I use those 4 much cooler tones there to create another design using that same embossing folder and the same wording, but completely different look this time. So what I did was just cut strips of colour, and then I've cut them in half diagonally with my trimmer, and then gone through that colour scheme. So we've got that lovely yellow green into the more green, into the green turquoise, and into the blue, and then repeated it, stuck them on, passed them through the same embossing folder. So we've used that same climbing roses there, and then I've gone over the top of it with a little bit of the darker blue ink, and again I've used that same sentiment as what we had. So you can see here, very, very similar sort of ideas, but very different finish on them. So that was for those blues and greens. You can see here we've got that lovely complement here of these cooler tones. So let's pop those to one side. And then the final one, I brought it right round the other side, and we've gone from the blue back round to the red, which is where we started. And we've incorporated a mixture of primary blue with secondary violet and primary red with secondary violet. And this time I came back to my sparkle pens, and I've just chose 3 colours this time. I was struggling to get a 4th colour in this one, so I've actually got Pink Breeze at the top, which I thought fit this violet red beautifully. Then I jumped to the middle with the violet, which was Cool Damson. And then I've also got, right round this side, I went for the darker blue here with Ice Denim. And I've got those 3 colours that I've actually created. You can just see that lovely shimmer on there. And what I did with those was use those to colour some cardstock. And again, I've sort of kept a theme, but just wandered slightly with the sentiment on this one. So I've coloured some pieces of scrap card with those 3 colours. You can see how they fit nicely in this band here. I've kept the back one flat, but I passed these 2 smaller pieces through the same embossing folder. So I've kept the same here. Oops, get rid of the bit that's attached to it. And I also embossed the bottom section of the card here with that same embossing folder and just kept that in the white. I've chosen the blue, picked out this blue shade for the layering here. And then I've just gone with any foliage that you've got there and kept that white. But you can just see that nice little bit of sparkle, little bit of texture in there. And then, of course, it has to have the bit of bling just to bring it all together. So just other examples of how you can use that colour wheel with those tertiary colours, which are the ones that appear between the primaries and the secondaries, all the way around the wheel. We've got the oranges, which is where we started there, and then into those greens and blues. So that's our study for today. I hope you've enjoyed that detail. I know there's so many of you have commented on this particular series about how you're enjoying it, how much you're learning. So yeah, it's really good to know that you're enjoying it, and I will be back with more. There is more to come yet. We've got a long way to go with this. Hope you've enjoyed the samples. Thanks for watching. If you did enjoy, consider giving it a thumbs up for me. It does help with the channel. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, I would very much appreciate that too. And I will be back very, very soon with my next tutorial for you. So bye bye for now.